Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad that you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have Benjamin Creme on with us, just here from London, who has been in communication with Maitreya, world leader, a spiritual teacher, yet not affiliated with any particular religion whatsoever, who is come to teach and help and inspire people to get in touch with their deepest, highest selves, so we can all together, guess what? Create a better world. Work together to create economic, social, political justice for everyone, everywhere. Something that our hearts are really always urging us to do. Now we have some inner guidance, and Benjamin Creme, who has been in touch with Maitreya in many very interesting ways about which he'll be speaking, will be speaking to us about those ways and the messages that Maitreya has communicated to him, that Maitreya has wanted all of us to hear very deeply with the depths of our heart and soul. So thanks so much, Benjamin, for being on our show.
It's my pleasure.
Great to have you. Yeah. You've been involved in this work for quite some time. I mean, why don't you, if you would,
years.
24 years.
24 years.
Incredible.
On the road, that is.
On the road.
Before that, years of training and preparation.
Your life has been originally as an artist,
Yes.
and you
Still
were
is to a certain extent.
to a certain extent,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Give us a little background, if you would, about what happened 24 years ago, what your life was, and then exactly what
Well,
happened.
as I am a painter, I've always been a painter. I was minding my own business.
In London, was this?
In London, I live in London, have done
Mhm.
for many years, although I come originally from Scotland.
Mhm.
And a man came to me at the end of 1958 and said that I was receiving communications from the Masters. Now, if people don't know who the Masters are, this is a group of unbelievably evolved, from our point of view, perfected men who have gone ahead of us in evolution, and in whose hands lies the plan of evolution for this planet. They are the custodians of the plan of evolution.
They hold the blueprints.
Yes, exactly. They know the plan, and their task is to make that plan visible, implement it through
Manifest.
humanity and the lower kingdom.
Right.
And they have lived in the remote mountain and desert areas of the world for thousands and thousands of years. Working in the main over all these thousands of years through their disciples, men and women in the world, people like Plato and Aristotle and Leonardo da Vinci and Rembrandt and Mozart and Einstein and Schweitzer and Abraham Lincoln and you name them, all the great people of the world who have created our science, our culture, who have made the great discoveries and so on.
Yes.
These are disciples of the Masters, every single one of them. Well, the Masters themselves have remained hidden until now.
This is relating to a lot of the work that we have on the Ascended Masters, who are speaking behind the veil, so to speak, through particular individuals.
They're not all ascended. There are different degrees of Masters, and a few are ascended, although they're often called the Ascended Masters.
In general.
The bulk of them are not yet ascended, but they are resurrected.
I see.
You know? And they are all God-realized or self-realized beings.
Yes.
And they've completed the schoolroom, which we call planet Earth. It has nothing more to teach them. And the presence here is simply that of overseeing the plan of evolution for the rest of us, stimulating and expanding our consciousness, fitting us for that same path of evolution which they have already trod.
So we can graduate too?
They are the exemplars, they are the guarantee that one day we can and will become like that. Perfect, needing no further incarnation on planet Earth. And they have been behind the scenes like this for thousands and thousands of years. But they've now come to an end of a cycle in their own evolution, which requires them to return to the world. And the signal for this return, it was thought it might be 12 or 1300 years yet, but the signal for it was given in 1945, June 1945, at the end of the Second World War, by the the master of all the masters, the one who holds the office of Christ or world teacher. And his personal name is Maitreya, the Lord Maitreya.
When you say Christ, you mean as in the Christ?
The Christ as the embodiment of the Christ principle on this planet, who overshadowed Jesus 2,000 years ago and manifested that principle through him from the baptism to the crucifixion. And Jesus became, from being Jesus the disciple, to being Jesus the Christ,
okay.
or the Messiah. And as he did before through Krishna and through Shankaracharya and various other teachers back through the ages. This is the...
Including Buddha?
No, the Buddha is the brother of Maitreya, and he overshadowed the Prince Gautama, and Gautama became Gautama Buddha. Maitreya overshadowed Jesus, and Jesus became Jesus the Christ.
Okay.
This is the age-old way for the appearance of the teachers, the avatars as they're called in the East, who have come every age, every cosmic cycle, like Hercules and Hermes and Rama and Mithra and Vyasa and Zoroaster and so on.
Sure.
Right up to the Christ and Muhammad. Yeah.
And even to this day, Satya Sai Baba.
Well, that is another kind of avatar. Sai Baba, I could talk about him, but he stands in a different relation to humanity from people like the Buddha or Maitreya and so on. He is not from the human evolution. Maitreya and the Buddha are both from our own human evolution.
Oh.
But there is a definite relationship between Maitreya and Sai Baba in that they both embody the energy we call love, the Christ principle.
Okay, so we'll get back to that. Sure. So then you were leading your life. That happened in 1945, in June of 45.
1958.
Came to
Towards
you.
the end of 58, this man said...
But you said at that point in June of 45 that the
Maitreya
decision was made...
his decision to return to the world
Yes, okay.
at the earliest moment, if humanity would make certain changes in its life, if it would put its house in order, for example.
Now, how was that announcement made?
Well, to his group, they all came together, and he announced that he was ready to return to the world at the earliest moment if humanity would take the first steps to put its house in order. For example, he said he would come when a measure of peace had been restored to the world, and when the principle of sharing was at least beginning to govern economic affairs, and when what we call goodwill, which to the masses is the lowest aspect of love, was manifesting and leading to the creation of correct human relationships. And he said as soon as these were beginning to take place, they didn't have to be perfectly implemented.
But
when our minds were moving in these directions, he would come without fail.
And he said this to his disciples?
He said this to his group of
students.
disciples who are the masters of wisdom. And they have disciples. So I'm a disciple of one of the disciples of Maitreya.
Okay, so it's that kind of hierarchy.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is called the spiritual
Hierarchy.
or esoteric hierarchy.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is the government of the planets, but behind the scenes.
Sure, sure. The hidden government.
The hidden government of the planet.
As it were.
In
Right.
whose hands is the control of the plan of evolution.
Yes, indeed.
Their plan is to bring us to the same point that they have reached,
Right.
which is perfect, needing
Perfection.
no further experience
On planet Earth. Or in three-dimensional reality altogether?
No, then you can go out of the physical body, you no longer need a physical body, you can go on to higher planets where they are in bodies but not dense physical bodies. All the planets of our system are inhabited, but if you went to Mars or Venus you would see nobody at all. Yet they're teeming, especially Mars, teeming with life.
I see.
There are more people on Mars than on Earth.
Really?
Yes, and but if you went...
Population
you would see
explosion in the fifth dimension.
they have bodies of the two highest of the four etheric planes. Now we recognize only three planes of matter: dense physical, liquid physical, and gaseous. But above gas, there are four further states of matter, invisible unless you have etheric vision, which gradually more and more people will
Develop.
come into incarnation with, and others will develop. A certain change in the eye will take place, and then people will see the etheric planes, which substand the dense physical plane, but come before the dense physical. The solid physical is a precipitation downwards from the etheric physical.
A contraction, as it were.
Yes.
There is a whole science called plasma physics, which does go beyond the three dimensions. I mean, it does posit an existence of
Yes, it's
a substance, actually, an actual substance
yeah.
that's beyond
Yeah.
the three-dimensional
Yes.
ones that we are so familiar
So
with.
there are really finer and finer
Yeah.
areas of what we would call gas,
Mhm.
but which are vibrational planes. They're matter vibrating at a higher and higher and higher octave of vibration.
Sure. So what happened to you, Benjamin, in 19...
Well, this man came and told me I was receiving these communications from the masters. I said, no, I'm not. I didn't hear anything. It's normally telepathic, you see.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not. He said, oh, yes, you are. And I've been sent to tell you that you are. I said, well, I don't hear anything. He said, no, the messages come to you, but they just bounce off you. I said, why is that? He said, because you're not open. I said, well, I mean, I'm open enough insofar as I believed in the masters. I've read all about them in the Theosophical teachings, the Alice Bailey teachings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you'd asked me, are the masters real? And so I said, of course they are. But, you know, the last thing on earth I expected was any kind of communication or contact with them. And that isn't modesty, it's just realism, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, don't worry, it'll come, it'll settle down. And probably because I'd been alerted, within a few weeks, maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks, something like that, the first message got through to me. It was the 3rd of January, 1959. And it simply suddenly told me, all at once, go to Blackfriars Bridge. It's one of the bridges over the Thames in London.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Blackfriars Bridge, Blackheath side, that's the south side. It gave me a time. It was about 3 weeks ahead, Tuesday, 18th, 9:30 p.m. So I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget it. And with great excitement and gathering excitement, I waited for the time and I went there. And I went over the bridge, there was nobody around. You know, it's a business area, and there was nobody around in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a car waiting at the far end of the bridge. And I sidled up to it and looked in, and there were some people in I didn't know. But one of them was the man who had come and told me I was receiving these contacts. And the whole thing started from there. And it got through. You know,
Yes.
I missed some, but, you know, more and more they got through solidly.
Communications that you were able to pretty clearly identify as from the masters.
From the master, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
We get messages
They
all
would
the
just
time,
tell me
but
to go to somewhere, and I'd go there, and
I see.
people, and so
That's
on.
specific, yeah.
like that.
Okay.
And he told me to get a tape recorder. I got a little Grundig portable. And he then began to give me long dictations, which I simply repeated onto the microphone as I heard them inside. And they got faster and faster as the telepathic rapport got better and better.
Yes.
This was why they were given, of course, to perfect the contact.
Sure.
And this went on for about 3 months. And then one night, in March 59, he said, now switch off the machine and kneel down. And he said, now our master, Maitreya himself, has something important to tell you. Then I had the most extraordinary experience of my life. Something which, you know, it was so different from anything I'd experienced. A tremendous energy poured down through the top of my head, right through, and I began to shake. I was kneeling, it was very uncomfortable. And I was shaking and my knees were sore, you know, and I was trying to forget my knees. And this energy was just filled my whole being and heart with the love of Maitreya. He's the Lord of love. And I sort of fell in love with the world, you know. It was everything in it. I was a total identification with everything living in the world. And it was as if this took in the whole of the world, and probably beyond if I could think about it, but the world was the immediate thing. And at the same time, he gave me a vision of how the masters see reality, outside time. They have no concept of time. Our view of time is succession of events, 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and so on. It's completely invalid. And one day we will wake up to the fact that this is unreal. The way the masters see time as the never-lasting now. And they see all the past and all the future simultaneously in the now. And that's what I was given. I was in like a huge sphere of light, standing or sitting, I don't know, but I was inside it. And on what I must say was the right-hand side, there was no sides, you know, but it felt like over there on the right, I could see in colour all the events of the past, back and back and back. Some of them I recognised, you know, various battles and kings and queens and people. And
almost like a movie, a film strip.
Yeah, but in layers, back and back and back. And there was a kind of thin screen, a thin film over them, so they were not absolutely sharp, but clear.
Yeah.
And this was going on, like all the past was still happening. And then if I kind of turn my attention here to what would be the left-hand side, I saw all the events of the future. Likewise, in colour, I could see myself, I could see thousands of people, I could see Maitreya, I could see the crowd shouting, Maitreya, Maitreya, you know. I was talking to them, explaining, and the whole thing was out, you know, laid out before me like that, back and back, you know, into the future like that. But all simultaneously. I didn't have to sit down, cut that off and look here. It was like all happening. Yes. That's how the masters...
Like a Gestalt experience.
That is how the masters can make predictions, because they already see it taking place. It's
not a prediction.
It's already happened on the higher spheres, and then gradually comes down through the planes until it precipitates onto the physical plane, if we take the action to make it precipitate. You know?
Yep.
And that lasted for some time, I don't know how long.
You were out of time?
I was out of time. And I heard his words exactly like I heard my own master's words before. And he said, very simply, he said, I myself am coming. Sooner than anyone thinks possible. It will be in about 20 years. In the event it was 18 years. And he said, and you will have a role to play in my coming if you accept it. And, you know, I was filled with the love of all the world.
Yes.
There was total identification with his love nature and the plan and everything. You know, what could I say? I said, right, you know, whatever it takes.
You've got me.
And if I had known what it involved, I might not have been so blithe, you know. But, you know, I just, right, you know, whatever. And so I made that kind of pledge there. And
what do you say, no to God?
No, that's all he said. And there was complete feeling of free will. There was no pressure of any kind. It was simply like a statement of fact. You will have a role to play if you accept it. And so I had accepted it. Then the whole experience finished. I gradually came back to normal. And the master's voice came back and he said, now sit down again and switch on. And he said, well, today you've heard something which changed your whole view of things. The time is coming when you'll be expected to act upon it and affirm his coming. He said that a couple of days later in a different context, and then he never mentioned it again. Not for years. And I gradually forgot about it. I forgot about all these pledges to you know, do the
You're right,
whatever,
to Maitreya.
you know, I mean, not immediately, but, you know,
Oh, sure.
20 years seemed an inconsumably long time.
Planet Earth is very dense, you know. We forget lots of things.
You know, 59. It was so 20 years. Oh, well, there's lots of time to prepare for that when it comes, you know. And then
this is a great story.
Well, the master said,
he's coming.
He's coming, and prepare the way, you know.
Indeed.
Do your job. And then he gave me all sorts of training and so on, which really started very seriously in 1972. I can't describe how it is. We worked together 20 hours out of 24 hours every day, less 5 minutes. Plus 5 minutes, not less.
Plus 5 minutes.
He gave me 4 hours, less 5 minutes sleep every night. And he trained me to do on 4 hours a night sleep. And we would work together all the time. He's in the Himalayas, and I'm in London, and we are in constant, mental communication. He's like sitting on my shoulder, and that continues to this day, you know. He's like a copain, you know, a friend, a brother,
yes, right.
you know, a
companion,
chum, you know.
Right,
and he's sitting there on my shoulder, and, you know, I just turn my attention to him, and he answers, usually, not always, almost always, and so on. He leaves me alone. At first it was absolutely constant, you know, for months and months, until he had forged a kind of vehicle for himself in the world, So when I look at you, he sees you. Everything we are saying now, he hears. It goes automatically. Every thought, every sensation that passes through my mind goes to him. That's why he calls me his karma. Because, I'm a very undisciplined disciple. He says, I'm the most undisciplined disciple, not only in hierarchy, but in the whole history of hierarchy, which is 18.5 million years old.
That is quite an honor, quite a distinction, I should say.
That is the only distinction I can claim as a disciple. The most undisciplined.
The most unruly.
That he has ever known.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah, that's why he says, I'm this guy. He said,
you have your place in history, Benjamin.
When it was being decided who would have you as a pupil, he said, we drew lots, and I pulled the shortest stock. So that is my relation. He's a very funny man.
That's
he has
good.
a humor. Yeah. It is so lovely.
Oh, that's wonderful. That equates with my theory. It's not a theory, it's a fact. God is really a comedian, and keeps us all laughing.
He must be, yes.
It must be, right. And the joke is on us, though,
Yes.
Anyway, please go on.
Well, Maitreya hoped that he could come around 1950. He hoped that, we would have changed through the experiences of the war and changed
45 to 50, right, sure.
But, the nation hadn't all suffered. That suffered equally, and they just quickly went back to the old ways, which are, the old nationalistic, self-serving,
greedy, self-serving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The ways of the past.
That's right.
And so he's coming.
That got us into trouble in the first place.
Yeah. So it was not until 1977 that he suddenly said, in July of that year, he said, I'm coming whether they're ready or not. And on the 7th of July, he donned the body which he had been creating in the 5 to 6 years before that, which he tested out in the world like every few weeks. And I was privy to all of this. I mean, he would be in my studio again and
Maitreya.
again. Testing out his body on all the planes. And then, on the highest planes down through the planes.
So you would feel him in different ways, and then it would actually manifest physically, and you would have dialogue on that level.
It would be a soul experience, it would be a mental experience, it would be an emotional experience, and then a dense physical experience. And he was testing out this one to make sure it worked well.
Right.
And that's the body in which he lives now. The technical term is oh boy, I've lost it. It's a body of illusions. The Mayavi Rupa. Mayavi means...
As in Maya, veil of illusion.
Maya, the veil
Rupa, form.
Of illusion. And Rupa, the body of form. Yeah. So this is a body which many of the masters make to appear physically in the world. But this is done in a unique way. It's never been made in this way before. This allows Maitreya to live at our level, subject to all the pressures of our vibration on the dense physical plane, and yet at the same time resistant enough to that, but at the same time sensitive enough to the higher vibration, to bring in his consciousness as the Christ, and the world teacher, and to do his work as the Christ and the world teacher, and to be recognized by us, in competition, if you like, with many other great beings who also live on the planet at this time. So that he has to bring enough of his consciousness to convince us that he is indeed the Christ. That took a lot of doing. The normal way is to take over the body of a disciple, as he did with Jesus, with Krishna, Shankaracharya, and so on. This time he's come himself at the head of his group. That's why they're returning, so he returns too in person to lead them in their, what is called the way of the higher evolution, about which we can know.
Now you say in competition, and I know maybe that's somewhat lightly said.
It is competition, but there will be in our minds competition. How does he stand vis-a-vis
relative to
vis-a-vis so and so?
Sure, because that's the common earthly way of looking.
Exactly.
But from their point of view, there's no such thing as competition. It's a cooperative effort that are working on as many levels, reaching as many human types as possible on all of the different graded levels. Okay.
Well, it worked. He got the body together eventually, and on the 8th of July, 77, he descended from the mountain. He came down into Pakistan and stayed there some days, and then on the 19th of July, 1977, he entered London, made his base the Asian community, where he still is. But he travels all over the world, all the time, and instantaneously, like that.
Right, so you say he's residing in London in the Asian community.
That's what we call the point of focus in the modern world.
Sure. So he's there in physical form, and yet he's probably also existing on all the other levels consciously, and therefore can change location and change form
Can be in several locations simultaneously.
Right.
I don't know how many, but several. And he can also create what are called kind of like facsimiles of himself in different guises. Men, women, children,
yes. Right.
old men and young men and so on, and they appear to people all over the world.
Now, are these existing people, or does he actually create
some... He creates what's called a familiar.
Yes.
And he can give it any appearance he likes. Sometimes he bases it on a live person. Other times it's a pure creation. And he appears to people in this way.
Now, when you said he came into Pakistan at that time, do you have reports of his arrival in Pakistan? Was there a recognition among people?
Maybe, but I don't know of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I doubt it.
And when he arrived in London, I mean, certainly you know it, but
Through the day, because I was told by my master that Maitreya had arrived that night. He rested for 3 days and then began his work. And then about a week or two later, I was taken before him, and I can't tell you what he said then. But the next time I was taken before him, he asked me if I would take publicly at my regular, what were then weekly public meetings about his coming, a kind of communication from him publicly, which I have been receiving privately, perhaps in my own group, for about 2 years before that. And these are the messages from Maitreya the Christ, which are published by Share International. He gave between...
That's the magazine that you're one of the editors of.
Mm-hmm. But there's also a foundation who do the publishing, including the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
He gave the first of these messages publicly on the 6th of September 1977, and the last one at the end of May 1982, and said that's the last one. And on the very last one he said the Christ, he had never mentioned the Christ. In all of the messages, he had called himself many things, but never mentioned the Christ. He said, the Christ is here, my friends. The avatar has come. And I heard this, and I wouldn't say it, because he had not said it before. I thought, no, I'm hearing it. And the master saying to me, say it, my own master, say it. I'm like, oh, stop, what are you, I'm sure I said, say it. So in the end, I said, the Christ is here, my friends. The avatar has come. And it's on the tape,
God.
There was a big gap before that, which we've cut out, of course, of the tape, because you can't have this long.
Well, I hate to say the tape is over now here, too.
Oh, yeah.
But we will continue and pick up right where we left off. This is quite incredible, and I really appreciate your being here with us, sharing this most important earthly and cosmic story with us, and with great import. And I just want to thank you again for being with us, Benjamin. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. As you've been hearing about Maitreya through Benjamin Creme, stay tuned next week and you can hear the rest of the story and what the actual implications are for you and me on planet Earth, and what we can do together to collectively connect to our highest energy and help to make this planet the place we want most to be. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Okay, for how long?